Hi, this is Dustin Hausner. Welcome to Jewish Culture and Jewish Awareness. I'm the Jewish Program and Outreach Director at the Wayne YMCA. All our Jewish programming is funded through the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. Now, today is actually very funny because as anyone who's watched the show before, you know I always say that it's funded through the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. And really, this show wouldn't happen, my position wouldn't happen, a lot of the wonderful things that happen wouldn't be without the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. And I've always wanted to have someone on the show that is actually from this wonderful organization. And I really do feel very fortunate that we have an incredible guest today. I would like to introduce Lisa Harris-Glass, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. So Lisa, so wonderful to have you here today.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Dustin.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. So before we get into a lot of what Federation does and the things like that, I was wondering if you could tell the people who are watching just a little bit about yourself and kind of the work you do in your role.
So great, thanks. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Federation. It's sort of a bit of a nebulous title because I feel that in different shops it means different things. Here it means that I work with all of our development staff. And I also work with our planning and allocation staff and our Israel departments, both here and overseas, and our synagogue department. So I have a kind of broad portfolio, but I love that because it just keeps it interesting. And I've been here for 10 years. Kind of crazy to say that.
No, Mazel Tov. That's a wonderful thing. May we all be so lucky in life to
Amen, amen.
so happy. So let me ask, because I feel like Jewish Federation is one of those things many people have heard of or have heard of Federation, but there's a lot of people who don't actually know the ins and outs of what Federation does outside of the very well-known brand name. And I was wondering if you could, to the best of your ability, tell us what exactly is Jewish Federation for someone who's not very aware.
So it's a great question, and it's one for sure that we get all the time. And I was on this call yesterday, and it was fascinating with this amazing trainer. Her name is Ray Ringel. If you could look her up, like I want to be Ray Ringel when I grow up. And she said, write a sentence about what Federation is. And, we did that. And then she said, and now describe Federation in one word. And I actually never thought about doing that. And the one word that I chose was there, right? Federation is there. We're there when we need to raise money to fund kosher Meals on Wheels. And when we're able to leverage that money through government grants that are matched by donors and foundation grants. We're there when there are young women in the north of Israel in Nahariya, which is our sister city, who are in homes where they're being abused. And to provide them a place of respite and access to counseling. We're there when Jews are in trouble around the world, when we funnel funding to our worldwide partners, the Jewish Agency for Israel and the Joint Distribution Committee. And we're there when Jews are murdered in Jersey City, and when there's a pandemic right here in our own community. We're there. That's what we do. And what I love about Federation is that, you might call it writ large in our ability for innovation, but it's this ability to pivot, right? When people donate to Federation, it's a way for them to, first of all, be assured that we are paying attention to everything that's going on in our community, both locally and nationally and globally, but also we are using our networks to take advantage of funding from every stream that we can find it, whether it's government grants, federal, state, county, whether it's foundation grants, whether it's knowing certain funders who have a certain affinity for a singular area and being able to go to them to fulfill a need as it comes up, but also that we're continually developing relationships with government officials and with leaders in the community so that we have this reach. And so it's all that possibility that we bring to the table. We only are able to bring it because of donors who trust us with their philanthropy and to speak on and act on their behalf. So I hope that answered your question.
No, I think it gave a lot to think about, which I think is always a wonderful thing when you hear so many different things. You have to really go through it. And obviously, I recommend anyone who's watching this, if you need to rewatch just to hear all the amazing things, please do so. I'm going to take a very quick moment of personal privilege of, when I got on this
I
position.
love when people quotes Robert's rules. So that was awesome.
I was going to say I grew up with it, so I'm oh goodness, that's a conversation for another time. But no, but seriously, when I first started was unfortunately not long after the incident happened in New Jersey, and Federation of Northern New Jersey did a phenomenal job getting an event together with um, Congress representatives, senators, assemblymen, different people, and having such a huge amount of people. Obviously, this is pre-COVID, so you could have a mass amount of people. And it was just so meaningful to have a group of people come together, and they spoke not what with eloquence, but also what they're working on. And I think it's a credit to Federation and any organization that in a short period of time can get people into a room and just get a response for what comes next. So I want to give personal kudos to Federation for being able to handle that and doing it so quickly.
Thank you.
So, but I want to move a little bit more because I definitely want to talk more about Federation. But curiosity, you yourself, who clearly is passionate and very knowledgeable about what Federation does, what made you want to get involved in Federation? Out of all the many things you've been involved with, why Federation? Why this?
This is like, it's not a funny question, but it's sort of a funny question, only in that I always knew of Federation, but I didn't know Federation. And for me, like for you and for anyone who's watching this, it's hard to put your finger on it because there's so many things happening because it is a large organization. Although I will, from the inside, tell you what we do is very curated. So it wasn't that I said, oh, wow, I need to go work at a federation. In fact, they had an opportunity and they called me and sort of invited me to come. And it was only when I got here that I really learned about the depth and breadth and impact that this organization represents. And I fell in love with the system. I'm probably its biggest cheerleader, and it's completely sincere because I have seen the impact of our work. I know that when we offer an ignition grant that helps a Jewish family choose to send their child to Jewish preschool rather than another preschool, and that when we know from surveys that like that grant actually helped them make that choice, and that at the end they're much more likely to do Jewish things as a family, to light Shabbat candles or bless a challah or say a blessing over their child than they were before they went to that Jewish preschool, right? That we know it. We have data that shows it. We know that when we're giving ignition grants to send kids to Jewish overnight camp, not this year, of course, but that's life-changing for these kids. And we also know, I actually just heard this story, and it's very fresh, and I'm gonna not cry, promise. But a woman I know, her father-in-law, sadly, he should rest in peace, he just died. And they weren't, there wasn't an economic need, but her father-in-law had been failing for a very long time, lived with his wife, thank God. But when the pandemic started, it was very isolating for them. And one of the things that we did with our partners, the Kaplan JCC on the Palisades, was they converted their their congregate meal program, where the seniors come together to have a meal and an activity. It's a 5-day-week program, to a home delivery program. Now, those amongst that group who qualified for Kosher Meals on Wheels, which requires an economic, right? There has to be economic need, went on to Kosher Meals on Wheels. But there was a group that didn't qualify for Kosher Meals on Wheels. Yet, in this pandemic,
Right.
They didn't have the ability to get those meals. And so we actually converted the funding and gave them funding to be able to deliver meals. And so I guess it must have been the day that this gentleman died and the meal arrived, right? Because they didn't know yet. And his widow said to his daughter-in-law, I can never express to you what it meant to us to have the food show up, to not have to worry about getting it, to know that someone was going to be at that door every day, right? That's it's like the best job on earth, right? Because we, not only did we get to like sort of think about things writ large and on behalf of the whole community, but then we get to see it actualized, and it's everything.
No, I mean, that's incredible. Obviously, I'm sorry for the loss for the family, but be able to shift things around to accommodate in such a way, I think is incredible, to say the very least. And it's important, especially during COVID. Let me ask, because I've seen organizations, they'll say, from the town of Rockland or wherever it's from. Yours is the Federation of Northern New Jersey. Can you talk about where exactly your spectrum is, where it covers? Because I think some people, it says Northern New Jersey, and, it's almost like saying, upstate New York, where everyone has their own idea of what that actually means. So I would love to hear what exactly the area covers for.
Yeah, totally, because it's a completely made up thing. It's not like the world recognizes this border. It's a federation border, but we're all of Bergen County and all of Hudson County, and we are parts of Passaic County. And I know it's a little crazy, but the reason it looks that way is, there were, a long time ago, there were lots of little federations, and then over the years they would merge. And so you have these sort of odd borders in some ways. Like when I first came here 10 years ago, we had half of Hudson County, right?
Right.
We had Northern Hudson, and now and then several years ago, we incorporated Lower Hudson.
Okay. So you kind of talked about this to an extent of many different programs and things you do, but I guess in a more localized setting, in the sense of like, events that people can go to, or I guess there's the pre-COVID conversation, the programs you would do normally for the people who would be available, and then everyone's had to adjust since COVID. So I would love to hear kind of the pre, and then what it is you're working on now.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to flip it over, only because
of course.
I'll start with the now. We actually pivoted very quickly to start to provide online content at the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, I think our first program was actually in March. And we've experimented with a lot of different things. We had a family trivia night. We had a comedian from Israel. And we've had cooking demonstrations and museum walks, and we've had content speakers, on Israel and on other things. And so there's sort of and we've had all these young family events and ways for a caregiver and a baby to connect through Shalom Baby online, when they do yoga classes and all different kinds of things. In the beginning, we came out very quickly and there wasn't a lot available. And then, of course, lots of people jumped on that bandwagon, and thank goodness, right? Because it was a crazy time. We were all a little bit sort of just stir crazy from being in our homes, but also, I think, learning as we were going. And I will say that I believe we've sort of we did take a breath and seek to curate our offerings to be, more in line with our mission. And so, you'll find tonight there's a programming on fundraising for the high holidays for synagogues. And when I say program, these are all virtual programs. You can find them all on our website at www.jfnnj.org. That's for the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey.org. And we're having a drive-in movie in August we normally have an Israel Film Festival. It's a pretty big deal in November every year, and obviously no movie theaters. So there's a drive-in movie open, and we're having a drive-in movie event featuring a film about the Israeli baseball team. And we also had an amazing program last month on sports during the pandemic. It was an incredible program, fascinating. And moving forward from the drive-in movie, we're going to be having a major gifts event. We're just securing our speaker now, and it's brewing, but it's going to be, we're going to have a dinner. It's not going to be all in person. Obviously, we can't do that, but we're learning to pivot in that way. And there will be an Israeli film festival. It's going to be in a brand new way, and it's going to feel a little bit like renting a movie on, one of the, on the
Yeah,
FiOS or something, where you get it for 48 hours, that kind of thing. So we're learning as we're going.
So let me ask, what have you been, because you've discussed it a little bit, but what have you felt have been the major needs reaction from the Jewish communities? Because you not only do you cover multiple different regions of New Jersey, but obviously the seniors with, let's say, like food and being able to get that, with children needing educational, like there's so many different types of needs. I'm just curious, what has the communities come out and say, Federation, we need these things, or has it been more, you've noticed there's a need and been able to try and respond that way? How's that been operating?
So we actively seek that information. So, we're in constant contact with our beneficiary partner agencies. And so, for instance, in the very beginning, in March, it was quaint. We thought it would be 30 days.
We all did.
Right. And I remember calling our agencies and saying, all right, I know that there's going to be extra expenses. What do you think those expenses are going to be? And we were able to come up with a number. And then we went out to the community and said, we want to fund. I'll be transparent about it. They told us $300,000, that they would need $300,000 for 1 month. And we came out and said, we need to raise $300,000 in 30 days. In order to help the community get what it needs to get through this, with increased meals and people not able to work, and helping them cover mortgages and the PPE, which, by the way, they couldn't even get, but they desperately needed. I'm going to get back to that in a second. And we went out and we raised that money. Not only that, we raised $400,000 in 3 weeks.
Wonderful.
The community stepped forward in an incredible way, very generous. People understand that this is unprecedented. And along those lines, when we were talking to the agencies, they were saying, we can't get shields, we can't get masks, we can't get, what are those things called? The paper, not robes, but
the full uniform. I know what you're talking about, and
you all know what I mean.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if anyone in the comments after the video wants to tell us what it is, we appreciate it.
I always forget that. I don't know what's wrong with me. So anyway, and we actually helped source these things. Like, we found them, and then we paid for them. And for instance, we were able to, we played a part in sourcing 1,000 face shields that were distributed between the Jewish Home Rockley and JAD, which is the Housing for Adults with Developmental Disabilities, and then they were donated. Right, so we ended up not even having to pay. But then when protective gear was needed, and in the beginning, I hate to say this, but I believe, in my opinion, there was gouging going on for the prices, but the agencies needed them.
Yeah.
So when JAD said, we found these and they were, this is what it was, we said, we'll pay for it. Right, this is what we raised this money for, and so I think it's always been a combination, but we actively seek this information. We actually put a survey out to every organization that works with the Jewish community in northern New Jersey. Mm-hmm. So that's current beneficiaries and others, right? Like people we maybe haven't had formal relationships with in the past, or don't currently, but maybe had in the past, or even if they're not mainly a Jewish agency, but they serve the Jewish community. We went out to all of them with all the survey information. To find out what are those needs, and we continue to go back, right? So that's, it's data driven.
No, absolutely. So I want to just touch upon the question of, it's wonderful that you have obviously these donors who have been able to contribute and be able to support such campaigns. I think a lot of people have made very tough financial decisions with COVID-19, whether they've been, furloughed, whether they just are just nervous of what's going to happen with their next paycheck. And some people have been able to still give and some have not been able to. When it comes to, like, let's say Federation, for example, you know, for those who are interested in giving, or what would be you would want to say to someone who is considering giving, or maybe it hasn't been directly impacted by Federation but they know it's a good Jewish cause? What would you say to someone like that?
So I would say to them that there are people in need who have never needed before. As you just mentioned, Dustin, there are people who've lost their jobs and can't make their mortgage payments. And by the way, if anybody listening falls into those categories, please know that there is help available, both for mental health, for support through what is a very difficult time, but also financial assistance through the Jewish Family Services of Northern New Jersey. And there were also, we gave money to the Hebrew Free Loan, so that they also have money that's available. So if you do need help, we please do reach out to them. And having said that, for those people who haven't been hit, and actually there are some people who, because of the business that they're in, are actually doing better, and the stock market, I mean,
I can imagine the mass
like
sale.
good right now. So if you can give, please give, because I can tell you already that we don't have enough resources to meet the demand. We're working every day to procure those resources, but we cannot do it without people like you who can afford to give. And so, we want to help the people who need the help, and we need people who don't need the help to help the others. So that's what I would say.
No, let me ask, for anyone who wants to learn more about ways they can give, or about your programming or things like that. I know you said the website and you said so eloquently, I think you've said it probably once or twice before, but where's the best places for people to find you or to see what Federation is up to? Because obviously I feel like there's so much noise now because everyone's online that sometimes it's not always easy to navigate. So where's the best places for people to find you?
So for sure at jfnnj.org. Also, I love to talk about Federation. And so if somebody wants to reach out to me, they can reach me on my email at lisag@jfnnj.org. I'm also happy to chat, although it's a little harder to get me on the phone. It's best to start with an email, and we'll set up a time to talk.
Very good. So that answers a lot of the questions I had. The problem is sometimes you get someone like yourself who's so professional, who answers all the questions before I even have to ask it. So it makes it much more difficult. But I have to say it's so amazing to hear the things that Federation is doing, how quickly they've turned around, and how much they've been able to give back. And hopefully, knock on wood, will be able to continue to give back in our community. So I really want to
thank you.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. Please, if anyone who doesn't know much about the Federation, please go onto the website. Please learn what's going on. There's so much happening, so many fun events, and a lot of very good Zoom webinars. I've been on a few of them, so they're a lot of fun. But I want to thank you, Lisa, of course, for joining us today. And everyone out there who's watching, I want you to stay safe, stay healthy, be well. And since by the time this video comes out, it will be almost our Jewish New Year's. Obviously, I want everyone to have a happy and healthy in these challenging times.
Amen. Thanks again.
Of course. Have a wonderful day, everyone.